Good morning. It's Monday. It's 9 o'clock. We're live. I have my coffee. And this is what I feel like today. It is spring. I have allergies. My nose is running. My eyes are running. And yet, it's 27 degrees and we had snow yesterday. It just seems like we should only have to deal with one thing at a time. But that's not the case. So today, what I wanted to do is hop on here and talk to you about how to compute your retirement and how you might be able to increase the amount that you're going to get in retirement. So specifically, I'm going to talk first to our federal employees, and then I'm going to talk to all of us who will be eligible for Social Security retirement. And eligibility for that benefit, we talked about it last week, but just as a reminder, I've got to be at least 62 and I have to have at least 40 credits or 40 quarters to be eligible. Now, once I am eligible, I talk about computation, and computation is just the word for how much money am I going to get? For our federal employees, there's a 3-line computation. I wrote it down. I want to show it to you, but it is your creditable service times your high 3 average salary times a formula. The formula is the only thing that's going to change. So there's one formula if I'm under the old retirement system, CSRS, and that formula is going to be 3 different lines. I'm going to get 1.5% times my high 3 times my first 5 years plus 1.75% times my high 3 times my next 5 years plus 2% times my high 3 for everything over 10, because I had 5 on the first line and 5 on the next line, 2% for everything over 10. That is the Civil Service Retirement System, or CSRS. If I'm under FERS, which is the system that's been in place since 1983, I typically have a single line formula. Now I'm saying typically because if I'm a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, an air traffic controller, a customs or border protection officer, I could potentially have 2 lines of formula. So my formula under FERS is going to be 1% if I retire under 62, or if when I retire, I have less than 20 years of creditable service. The formula is going to be 1.1% if I retire at 62 or older and I have 20 years or more when I retire. So both of those are required. I got to be at least 62 and I got to have at least 20 years to get the 1.1. Our law enforcement officers, firefighters, air traffic control, customs and border protection officers, a couple of others that are lumped into that category that we call special provisions, would get 1.7% of their high 3, but up to a maximum of 20 years. So 20 times 1.7 means 34%. And then if I had more than 20 years, everything over 20 is at 1% times my high 3. So that's why I said they might have 2 lines, right? 1.7 for the first 20, 1% for everything over 20, we add it together. CSRS is 3 lines, FERS is 1 line, maybe 2 if you're a special provision employee. If you are going to be collecting a Social Security retirement, it's very similar to what our federal employees are getting, in that I still have creditable service, I still have a formula for Social Security. It's going to be 3 lines, 90% of the first couple hundred, 32% of the next couple thousand, and 15% of everything over the top of the first 2 numbers. So it's very similar to CSRS. But for our federal employees, we had a high 3. For our Social Security, we have a high 35. High 35 versus high 3. Okay, so how do I know what my high 3 or my high 35 is? For the federal employees, the high 3 is any consecutive, and that's super important, any consecutive 3-year period when I was making the most basic pay. And we'll define basic pay and base and all that other stuff in another video. But essentially, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get out this clear acrylic block that represents 3 years. I'm going to set it on your records, and I'm just going to start sliding it around. And wherever I find the highest block, that's what I'm going to be using for your high 3 average salary. Typically, it's the last 3 years that you work, but that's not true for everybody. For my high 35 Social Security, it's 35 years of earnings that I paid into Social Security. So I have to pay a tax right now of 6.2% every one of my paychecks. That money's going into Social Security. And when I file my taxes, I also have reported earnings for Social Security. So you can find this on the 3rd page of your Social Security statement. Where you look at that, ssa.gov is where you can get it. Page 3 will say, in this year, here's what you reported in that year and that year and that year. Simplistically, it's a little more complicated than this, but we don't have to get into all of that today. Simplistically, I'm going to just look at page 3. I'm going to pull out the highest 35 numbers. Always has to be 35. So if I have 30 numbers, I'm going to have to use 5 zeros too. The highest 35 numbers, including any zeros, add them all together, and then we're going to divide in order to get a monthly average. Okay? Federal employees are based on a high 3. Social Security is based on a high 35. Now, the second thing that I wanted to talk about in this video is how can I increase my retirement for these defined benefits, for these annuities, for these pensions. I can do that 2 different ways. One, I can work longer. Working longer is always going to result in a higher benefit because we multiplied the formula by a high something by creditable service, or the length of time that I was paying in. So the bigger that is, the bigger the bottom line is going to be as well. The second thing that I could do is make more money. If I get a job that is paying me more money, I get a promotion, even if it's a temporary promotion, it doesn't matter. Or if I'm working for myself and I increase my business model. If I increase my money, then my high 3 and my high 35 are increasing as well, which means when I multiply the 3 things together, the bottom line's getting bigger all the time. Make sense? Now, that's not a whole lot of control. And what I want to talk about later in the week is things that I can control to a larger degree, and that's my savings and that's my investments, and we'll get into that on Friday. But today, I just want you to understand how you can increase your federal retirement, your FERS, or your CSRS, how you can increase your Social Security. What I would love is if you would interact with me so that I don't have to stand on here every day and talk to myself. I would love to know if you have any questions, if you need any clarification. What are the things that you wonder about when we talk about your retirement, we talk about your Social Security, we talk about your TSP? What are your concerns? I see that you're watching, Jen. Thank you for being here. Brent, thank you for being here as well. I'm going to hop back on here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. In the meantime, if you have questions, drop them in the comments right here. Send me an IM. I will address them. I won't use your name, so you don't have to worry about that. But I would just love to have some interaction from you. I'm asking for that today. I hope you have a great Monday.